just completed the oath of office ceremony with Judge Donald, and it was a very nice way to do it in a very unusual setting. Obviously, having it at my home here in the backyard was something that we did not anticipate, but I think under the circumstances, it certainly made all the sense in the world to do it this way. So I talked a lot about where we are right now as a community, where we are as a nation, where we are as a world, and the importance for us to come together even as we stay apart. Because I think this is a time that's challenging us, and it's a time when we have to do everything we can to navigate these turbulent waters together. I also spoke about the challenges we face, and there's actually a number of crises that right now I am navigating and are my number one priorities. Clearly, the public health crisis, the COVID-19 crisis that we're seeing in our community, that in particular showed some of the schisms that we have in the community when it comes to healthcare. When I first saw the number of cases in the African American community, I realized that this was really a reflection of a lot of the underlying issues we have in our society, in our healthcare system, in the way that people of color, African Americans in particular, are treated in our city and in our society. Second, we saw an outbreak in the South Side, in the Hispanic community. And most recently, we're seeing outbreaks in the senior centers around not just this area, but around this country. And so right there, you see three groups that we have to recognize need our help and need our attention. So that's the first crisis, is that health crisis. The second crisis, of course, is the economic crisis. And I understand that there are thousands of people that are suffering right now, and thousands of businesses that are suffering right now. And we want to get life back to normal as quickly as we can. Normalcy is important. And that's one of the reasons that we have to abide by these stay-at-home rules, these safer-at-home rules. The third crisis that you're going to see more of, and unfortunately the city and the county and the state are going to experience, are the fiscal crises, because of the increased costs of the work that we're doing to combat COVID-19, as well as the drop in revenue. And that's why there's so much interest, particularly at the federal level, to have the federal government not only deal with some of the business issues, but deal with the issues that we as local governments are facing, particularly in areas where there is such a high intensity as there is in Milwaukee, where we have in Milwaukee County approximately half the cases in the state. But that doesn't mean that other parts of southeastern Wisconsin go unaffected. Of the 10 counties in the state that have experienced COVID-19, 7 of them are in southeastern Wisconsin. So this is not just a Milwaukee problem, but it is certainly having an impact on Milwaukee. The third part of the crisis is, of course, or the final part is the crisis that we're seeing in some parts of our education system, where some kids don't have access to the internet, are unable to get the training they need. And I don't want to see the learning gaps that we have and the achievement gaps grow in southeastern Wisconsin. And that's something we're working with the school system right now. So there are actually 4 crises that we're facing right now. There's the healthcare crisis, there's the economic crisis, there's the governmental fiscal crisis, and there's the educational crisis. And those are issues that affect so many people in our community. But with all of that, I remain totally optimistic about the future of this city, because I know the people in the city, and I know what they are capable of doing. I know their resiliency. I know as I walk through the neighborhoods of this city that I see people who love their children and want to see them get a good education in every single neighborhood. I see people in every single neighborhood who want to have a job where they can support their families. And I see people in every single neighborhood who want to be safe. And so those common denominators really are shared values for all of us. And so no matter where you are in the city, whether you're on the north side, the south side, the east side, the west side, we're all the same. We're all the same, and we all want the same thing. We want our kids to get a good education. We want to have jobs where we can support our families, and we want to be safe. And those are my priorities. And so as I look to the future, because this is all about the future, once we get out of this COVID-19 disaster area that we're in, I remain optimistic, and I want to continue to concentrate on creating jobs. Before COVID-19, we know we had a lot of success, particularly in the heart of the city, because we've got 20,000 more jobs now, at least going into COVID-19, than we did 10 years ago. We also know going into COVID-19 that our violent crime rate dropped 4 consecutive years in a row. Those are basic indicators, but they are incredibly important indicators. People want to have jobs where they can support their families, and people want to do everything they can to be safe. Those are my priorities as well. So I look at where we are right now. I look at the challenges that we face. And again, I'm optimistic. I want us to do everything we can to navigate forward. So my priorities for the next 4 years include, and certainly are at the top of the list, getting those family supporting jobs, particularly in the neighborhoods where we need family supporting jobs. That's why I put such a high priority on trying to get the jobs at Century City with Strauss. Those were good union family supporting jobs, and that's what we continue to look for. So jobs, I want us to also continue to bring down the crime rate. And we're off to a rocky start this year, but we are going to do everything we can, not just with the police department, but with our Office of Violence Prevention, with our community groups, with church groups. We have to have people in this community engaged in reducing crime. And that's a priority for mine as well. Finally, or not finally, there's 2 other issues that obviously I want to work for as we move to the future. One is early education. As I said, I'm concerned right now with the schools closed that we're going to see the education gap grow rather than shrink. And that underscores why it's so important for us to put a lot of emphasis on early education. And so I'm going to continue to work with the foundations, with businesses, to make sure that we can, working with the child care centers, working with others, to make sure that we can have our kids prepared when they go to kindergarten. That's imperative. And that's making sure that child care workers are paid well, making sure that we're having safe places for kids to be. And then the final issue that I just want to talk about for a minute is the issue of housing, because we have made strides in housing, but that continues to be a high priority of mine. I want to continue to work toward 10,000 homes that are either new or rehabilitated, because homes are important in neighborhoods. And I look at the next 4 years as an emphasis on neighborhoods and bringing this economy back. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And from T. Richmond to everyone, thoughts on, this is a question on election-related infections. Yesterday, the commissioner talked about this issue. And as she noted at that time, we have completed about 30% of the analysis. And I anticipate that we're going to finish that analysis within the next day or 2. So I'm reserving final judgment until we have that. Again, as she indicated yesterday, there were 7 people that have tested positive that were either working at the polls or were voting. And I think the majority of those, the vast majority of those, were people who voted. I think that it was, most of this was not people who were working at the polls. But I know that there was 1 sick poll worker, and we want to make sure that those individuals get tested as well. How are city officials discovering people who worked the polls or who went to the polls who got sick? My understanding, I think now, is that that's a standard question, and we can address that more with the health commissioner at our 3:30 call. But I think that that's a question that we are now asking people as well. We found 1 sick poll worker who doesn't know where to go to get tested. Her doctor says she's not sick enough to get a test. You're going to see a lot more testing, and the governor announced yesterday that there are going to be a lot more test kits available. Exact Sciences, which is working out of Madison, has said that they have a lot more tests available. Right now, what our priority is as a city is to go to these long-term care facilities, the House of Corrections, do that in the next few days. We are planning, and the planning is going on as we speak, to get more tests available for people who are symptomatic. And so the individual, for example, I think, who was told she couldn't get the test, I think that she will be eligible for that test, and I hope she's eligible for that test. So we're going to continue to expand that, because I know that the way for us to get life back to normal is to have more testing, more isolation for those who test positive, to do more tracing. And that, again, is something that we're working on in real time right now, as we augment those teams that will contact individuals who have tested positive. The first call is going to come from a healthcare provider, but then when we know who the contacts are, we're looking to expand the group of people who can make those contacts to include other city workers. What resources and money can the city dedicate to help businesses recover from the current pandemic? before I even get to that, I want to remind people as strongly as I can. The U.S. Congress is considering right now the legislation that would add more money for businesses. The reports I've seen just in the last 12 hours is that the predictions are that that money is going to be gone within days, if not hours. So if you are planning to put in an application for these funds, do it today. If you are planning to put in an application for these funds, do it today. You do not want to be in a situation 3 days from now where you're told that the money is gone. And I want the people in southeastern Wisconsin, obviously I want as many businesses as we can in Milwaukee to take advantage of that. We are working right now to get funds from the COVID funding from the federal government. And our Department of City Development is working with some private business people to see how we can augment that for small businesses. So we are waiting to see what the final amount is we're going to get from the first allocation so we can set that up. But that's something that's happening in real time as well. So I think I've covered the questions. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
If you have any questions regarding today, and do expect to see all the key stakeholders on the 3:30.
Thank you all very, very much.